Vance and I were married for 22 years, and as with most long-standing relationships, we had gone through many ups and downs over the course of our lives together. We had celebrated the births of our 4 children. We had gone through the deaths of our grandparents. We went through the deaths of both of our fathers. And then there was just the day-to-day ups and downs, trials, joys of everyday life with a family and as a married couple. So Vance was just very involved in our day-to-day life. He was a great dad to the kids. He was very involved with them. We worked opposite shifts for many, many years. I worked days and he worked nights, so that someone would always be there for the children, and so that they would have a parent with them, at all times. He spent most of his free time fishing with his sons, especially our younger son. He just really loved fishing with his dad, and they would spend countless hours at the lake fishing. And for the girls, he would do special days with the girls where he would take them out shopping. They would go out to eat. They would go to the park. He would just really do whatever it was that they wanted to do. And he really just tried to be present in everyday life with his children and with the family. He took them to doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, orthodontist appointments. He went grocery shopping. He helped clean the house. He helped do the laundry. He was just very hands-on as a dad, and we depended on each other a lot because of our work schedules and that kind of thing to make sure that everything got done with the family. He really enjoyed doing special activities with his boys, like the monster truck shows, and they loved to go to the WWE wrestling events when they would come to Atlanta. They would go to enjoy that. He went to many a concerts with the girls. They liked One Direction and Ed Sheeran, and he would go with them and honestly enjoyed it a lot more than I did. So he was really a good dad to the kids and just very involved with them in day-to-day stuff, as well as doing special activities with them. We worked hard as a couple and as a mom and a dad to our kids to make our family strong and stable, and to give everybody the best shot they had to be successful, and we just really worked hard at it. July 29th, 2016 was a typical summer day. Vance and Jeremiah had gone fishing late into the evening and had a good time, and when they got home, as it was already pretty late, I had kind of already gone to bed, because the next day, on July 30th, was going to be JC's 13th birthday party. So we had all the presents ready and the cake ready, and everything was ready to go. We were just going to go to bed and get up the next morning and have the party. And so they got home, and Vance was not feeling exactly right. He woke me up and said he had heartburn. And did I have any heartburn medication? And I said yes, so I gave him a heartburn pill, and he took it, and I tried to go back to sleep because of, needing to get up the next day and be ready for the party. And I kept hearing some noises in the living room, sounded like he was talking or whatever, so I just went back out into the living room, and Jordy and Jeremiah were upstairs on our balcony talking to their dad back and forth, and he was in the living room. And I said, what's going on? It's, I'm trying to sleep. We got to get up in the morning. And he was just saying how he didn't feel right. And he was drinking some water and pacing the floor and just trying to do whatever he could to feel better. And by this point, the kids and I were really thinking that something was not right, because these were not typical symptoms for him to have. And it seemed like it was lasting a really long time. And, typically you take a heartburn pill, within 30, 45 minutes, you're feeling better. But he was not feeling better. So we said, hey, we need to probably go to the hospital or call 911. And he was just like, no, we're not going to the hospital. We're not calling 911. We have JC's birthday party in the morning, and I'm not going to mess that up. And that just always stuck with me as being so true to the kind of person he was, to where even when he was feeling poorly and not feeling, himself, that he was still thinking about his daughter and not wanting to mess up the next day with the party. So at one point, we're still in the living room. The kids are still on the balcony. He says, well, I'm going to go out and get a breath of fresh air and see if that helps anything. And I was like, okay, well, just hurry back in. So he went out and walked around a couple of minutes and came back up the steps, came in the front door and fell to the floor. And, at first you're trying to figure out, okay, what's happening? I didn't know, could it be a seizure? We didn't have any idea. So the kids said, Mama, call 911 now. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to call 911. So I called 911. Right around the time of calling 911, we got him turned over. The kids came down and helped me kind of get him turned over to his back, and we realized that he was not breathing. And so I screamed at Jordy. I said, Jordy, start CPR. Daddy's not breathing. Start CPR. So she had just gotten certified in CPR the last week or two prior in one of her classes at school. And so I said, start CPR. And I'm still talking to the 911 operator. And they said, help's coming. Just keep doing the CPR. And shortly thereafter, our neighborhood fire department arrived. And they took over the CPR. And they pulled out the AED machine. And the kids and I, at that point, went upstairs to JC's room. And we just started praying. Because we didn't really, there's so many thoughts going through your head. You have no idea really what's happening. But it's not good. And so we were just praying and praying and praying. And I just kept hearing, as I'm praying, I kept hearing the AED machine saying, continue CPR, administer shock now. And it was just over and over and over and over. And I don't know a lot about healthcare. That's not my field, but I knew that was not a good thing. Because typically, you use the AED device and it restarts the heart. That's the purpose of it. So I was really concerned. It was indescribable, the feeling that was over us right then. And at that point, the ambulance arrived and they took over from the fire department and continued the CPR, put him in the ambulance. So I ran downstairs to tell Joshua what was happening because he was asleep. His room is in the basement, so he hadn't heard anything happening. He didn't even know that anything was occurring. So I woke him up and I told him, I said, come on up here. I want y'all to sit on the couch while I'm going to the hospital. And as soon as I know something about Daddy, I'll let y'all know. So I got in the car and went to the hospital. And when I got there, the young lady at the desk said, I told her who I was, and she said, oh, okay, well, I want you to come back into this little conference room and wait on the doctor. And I was like, okay, this is definitely not good, because normally when you go into an ER and you're there to see somebody, they take you to the room. So I just, like I said, I was just overcome with a terrible, terrible feeling. I don't even know how really to put it into words. But I just knew that I was about to hear something that I was not prepared to hear. So the doctor came in and he told me that Vance had passed away, that they had done CPR for 45 minutes. They administered the AED, the shock, many, 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 many times, as I already knew. And they were not able to get his heart restarted. And so my first thought was, okay, now what? I even told the doctor, I said, no, this can't be right. I said, we have 4 kids at home that we have to finish raising. This can't be right. And the doctor said, he said, well, he didn't know if this would really be a consolation to me or not. He said, but we are one of the few families who really did everything right when this happened. We started CPR immediately. We called 911 immediately. We got him help as quickly as we could. And he said that his sudden cardiac arrest was so significant that even if he had been in the hospital setting when it had occurred, the doctor didn't even know at that point if they could have done anything at the hospital, even if it had happened right then and there in the hospital. So, that was nice, but that didn't really help me as far as knowing what to do. So I had to go home, and got home. The kids were still sitting on the couch. I told the kids, that Daddy was not coming back, that he had passed on. And honestly, I cannot even begin to tell you the feeling of telling your children that. That was the awfulest thing. And it was something that I would never have imagined that I would be saying to my kids. And so we went back up to the hospital so they could see him if they wanted to. A couple of the kids did, and a couple didn't. And some of his other family members came up at that time to see him and to be with us. And so that's when the strangest, hardest, most difficult days ever began for us. I had to, plan a funeral. I had to pick out clothes. I had to do all the things that in your 40s you don't imagine doing this. I mean, Vance was 47. He didn't have any health issues. He wasn't on any medication. He didn't drink. He didn't take drugs. This was just something that happened, and there really was no understanding it or figuring out, why did this happen? There was no answer to that. So we went through all the steps that you have to do after someone passes away, and Ben spoke at Vance's funeral, and one of the things that he had said was that the best is always still in front of us, and the best is yet to come. And out of all the things that happened over those few days of the funeral and the visitation and just all the things that happened during those first few days, that was the one thing that really stuck with me. And the one thing that I can actually really remember about the funeral was Ben saying that. And at that point, I wanted to believe it. I knew I had to believe it. I didn't know how to believe it. Because how do you believe that the best is still out there when you just buried the dad of your kids and now you have to do this without him? I mean, I didn't understand. How could the best still be in front of me? But there was a point where I had to just say, okay, I don't know how it's true. I don't know how God's going to use this or what God's going to do, but I have to believe that God's going to do something with it. And so those first few weeks, months, years even, we just really had to take things slow. At first, I took every day minute to minute. It would be as simple as, okay, get up out of bed. Okay, get in the shower. Okay, now do this. And it would just be minute to minute. And that helped with my anxiety and my fear of the future and what was going to happen next, because I only had to focus on this minute. Okay, I got through that minute. Now I'll do this and I'll get through this minute. And so that really helped me to just look at things in small steps. I was praying more than I had ever prayed before, just that the Lord would show me how to do this and how to get through this this time with the kids and with myself. And I had to go back to work, and the kids had to go to school, and I just decided early on, the Lord just told me, you need to be the example, that if you get up and you go to your job and you do what you need to do, the kids are going to get up and go to school and do what they need to do. So I just really started, embracing the fact that I had to be the example. I had to be strong, and I had to do it with the Lord, so that the kids would have the best chance to continue progressing and being successful as they grew up. I kept things very consistent, as much as I could with our daily life, the way it had been when Vance was still with us. I tried to keep things very similar. I didn't upset any routines or anything that we did together as a family, or I just kept going with the way things had been. And of course it was different because there was a person missing, but consistency was good for us, and it helped us to get through, especially, like I said, those first few weeks and months and even the first year I had to give myself grace for when I made mistakes, because I'm sort of a perfectionist and I don't really like to mess up, and I like to do things right. And when I would make a mistake with the kids or with anything, I would beat myself up over it. And I learned not to do that. I learned that it's okay, that God will still honor even a wrong choice. That, God can still do something with it and still make it right. So I just really practiced forgiveness even with myself. And even for the fact of, I had to forgive myself for not taking Vance to the hospital right away when he started showing symptoms. I felt like that was my fault. I know it's not my fault, but I felt like it was my fault. And I had to forgive myself for that. I had to let that go and realize that God was in control of it, and that I couldn't have done anything more than what I did, that I did the very best I could with a situation that no one would really know what to do. I started going to therapy, so I would have someone for me to have a sounding board for, and to talk over how I felt and the decisions I had to make now as a widowed single mom of teenagers and a grown adult son. I needed somebody that was just for me. So that helped a lot. One of the most important things I did throughout this journey, and it didn't happen overnight and it didn't happen automatically. It took some work, but I really started practicing gratitude in my life. I realized that even in the worst of times, we all still have something to be thankful for. And when I really started looking for things to be thankful for, I found a lot of things to be thankful for. And I mean, it was a terrible time, but there were still so many good parts that happened during that journey. And I just tried to really look for that and look for the positives, and realize that God was still blessing me even though something terrible had happened in our lives. I really held on to a couple of scriptures in the Bible that I would repeat to myself over and over and over again. And one of those is, we walk by faith, not by sight. And I really just had to keep that in the front of my mind at all times, that this journey for me and for my kids, it will never make sense. It will never make sense to us why this had to happen, why we had to go through this, why we had to lose their dad at such a young age. But I know that we're walking in faith, and that with that, God is going to do something with this. And He has given us so many blessings. And I kept telling myself, the phrase that Ben said about the best is still ahead. And that's really how we've gotten to the point that we're at now.
So I pretty much grew up with a very normal life. I was in church, on and off, that I can remember throughout my life, but I always had like a sense of who God was and what I was expected to do with that, knowing. I'm Courtney Buchanan. I'm married to Joshua, and my background is I grew up with a very normal home life and church life. I remember being in and out of church as a kid, but always knowing God and knowing right and wrong things to do, and having a good moral compass. Things really took a turn for my family when my dad's dad, my papa, passed away my freshman year of high school. This was extremely difficult for our whole family. We knew it was coming. He had been sick for a very long time, but he was just a very loved member of our family, and I took it especially hard because we lived with my Nana and my Papa growing up, and so they had a big part in raising me and my siblings. Because of his death and me not really knowing how to navigate those feelings of grief, I took a very sharp turn off of my walk with God. I started smoking. I started drinking every chance I could get. I was sneaking out of my house and hanging out with people I should not have been with. I was in a very bad relationship. This is where my parents intervened in my life and really pulled me back in the direction I needed to be going. They, separated me from this guy who I did not need to be around and got me back into church. I was, school, work, church, or home was where I lived. And looking back on that now, I'm very grateful because I would not be who I am today if my parents would not have interjected themselves into my life and taken control. This is when I also got really plugged back into my home church where I grew up, and I started keeping the nursery on Sundays or Wednesdays if they needed it. That's also when the recovery program at my home church started. It was called At One, and they needed somebody who was faithful to keep the nursery every week, and so I volunteered and was doing that. And it had been 3 years of doing nursery for At One when I finally met Joshua.
My name's Joshua. I'm Vance's son. That night when he passed away, the last thing I said to him before I went to bed that night, I was mad. I'd borrowed his phone charger, and I gave it back to him, and he said it wasn't working, and I was like, well, it worked fine before. I was just using it, and so not knowing that was going to be the last time I would talk to him, the last thing I said to him, I had some grief there. On that night, I was asleep downstairs, and I remember my mom coming down there and shaking on me and saying something's wrong with Daddy. And I kind of thought it was a dream, kind of went back to sleep. She woke me up again, got up, went upstairs. Everybody was on the couch and everything. I saw him heading out to the hospital. Just was in disbelief about what was going on, and just, thought it all was a dream. But it wasn't. And then my mom called and told us, that he had passed away, and I was devastated because a lot of things came to my mind like that night. That night, my dad and brother went fishing, and they asked if I wanted to come, and I said no, which is one of the things I regret because it was my last chance to spend some time with my dad. Last thing I said to him, I had borrowed his phone charger, and he said, just bring it back to me when you're done. And when I brought it back to him, he said it wasn't working. I said, well, it was working just fine before. And that was kind of the last thing I said to him. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd a little bit before my dad passing away. And, it was more of an occasional thing. It wasn't an all-the-time thing. And I found that weed helped numb the pain of my dad and all the grief and just everything I had. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And before that, my granddad had passed away a year before, and my other granddad did too. So there was just a lot of stuff, but I guess the icing on the cake was when my dad passed away. It was where I was just like, I got to do something. So I started smoking more, hanging out with the wrong people, lying to my mom. I lied so many times I couldn't keep my lies straight. They started blending together. My mom started questioning me. Then one night I was getting ready to leave and go to a party, and my mom had knocked on my door, and I had a couple of blunts rolled, and I threw it in my dirty clothes, and she came down. She was like, I'm here for your dirty clothes. And right then I knew I was about to get caught when she picked up all the clothes, and of course the weed fell out, and she paused and looked at me and was like, what is this? And I was like, I'm just smoking cigars. And she opened it up and saw what it was. And she's like, we got to talk. There's a big problem here. You can't have this in my house. You can't be doing this. And I thought I didn't have a problem. I thought I can just quit. I was like, no, it's no big deal. I'm only doing this once a blue moon. I can stop. And I really meant what I was telling her, I was going to stop. But then I realized I couldn't stop. I needed that. I needed that feeling of just nothing, because nothing was better than feeling the pain that I was feeling. And so I got caught. Again, my mom was like, I can't have you in my house. And to go back before that, she has said, if you do this again, you can't stay here. And, it's my mom, so I'm like, oh, she loves me. She's not going to kick me out. She kicked me out. And I went living with somebody that was selling weed and started selling weed, was staying with him, and using it to support my habit and give me a place to stay. And it just became, to me, what is a normal life. And it's so far from normal. It's just a terrible road to go down. And then I remember one night I was at a party and I had took some pills and fell asleep on the couch, and I woke up and my car is not there. And I'm like, where's my car? And somebody said, oh, you could take it to McDonald's. And I said, no, I don't remember saying that. And about that time, he pulled back up at the house, and we got into an altercation. And anyways, I ended up getting jumped, beat pretty bad, and somebody did a backdrop on my car windshield, busted it out. And I remember that night driving home. My mom hadn't heard from me in probably a month, or I don't know. It was a while, and I remember it was late at night. I'm throwing up out the window, trying to make it home. It was God that got me home that night, and she panicked, and she's like, oh my gosh, and everything. And so I go to the hospital, and at that point, I decided, you know what, these aren't friends. Friends don't beat up other friends. And I decided I was going to stop, and I stayed home for about a week, didn't smoke, drank, anything. And as soon as my face healed up enough, I was right back going to the same people, doing the same things, living the same lifestyle. So after that, it was probably another couple months, and I finally decided one night that I've had enough and I need to quit. I'm tired of being sick and tired. And so I called my mom, and she agreed for me to come home. And I came home, and she's like, well, you can't just stay here. You got to go to a meeting. You got to get some help, because you got a problem. And I knew I had a problem, and I knew I needed to get help. And my mind was telling me, there's no way you can get sober. You're too far in this. And my heart, I wanted to get sober. And so that night, I decided to go to a meeting in Douglasville. And sure enough, on the way to the meeting, I don't think I ever told my mom this. I smoked the blunt on the way to the meeting. I was trying to get everybody off my back. Like I said, I wanted to get sober, but I was also just trying to get everybody off my back and get in a steady place to live. And when I got there, I was high. A guy named Ted came and hugged me and said, welcome, brother. And I've never had just a random stranger come up and hug me. And I was like, whoa, don't be hugging on me like that. You don't know me. Just that mentality that I had going in there. And I sat there, and about halfway through the meeting, my mind started getting back right, and I was listening. I realized that these people are just like me. They've went through the same stuff, and some of them have went through more stuff than I have. I'm like, I know if that dude can get sober, I can get sober. There's no way that he can get sober and I can't. And so that kind of started the journey. Then I went to a meeting the next day. Let me back up. On that night that I left to go back home, I threw half an ounce of weed out the window. I was like, I'm done with this. I don't need it. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I went to a meeting the next day, and that's kind of where my recovery started, in those two meetings. And I found somebody I could talk to, somebody that's been through everything I have, and people that I can truly call friends. And it was about a month or two into recovery. I still had that urge to not necessarily smoke weed, but be around it. So I came up with the bright idea that, hey, I'm not smoking weed anymore. Why don't I sell it? And so that's what I did. I started doing that, and I got arrested. At that point, everybody thought that I was on the right path, but yet I was still lying. I was still doing the wrong things. And that night, I got arrested, and when I did, I got out that night. My mom was very mad. She still bailed me out, being the type of person that she is. And I later found out that I was facing 25 to 30 years in jail for selling weed. Yeah, I know it's crazy. And my life just was, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? Anyways, I got an attorney and was able to work out a deal where I got 5 years probation. The First Offenders Act, after my 5 years of probation, my record's clean as if it never happened. And that was just such a blessing for me, that God gave me that opportunity to, hey, you messed up, but pick yourself back up and move on. Don't look back, just keep going. And that's how it started from there, me really, really taking it seriously, because I knew, like, you only get so many chances before you don't get any more chances. And I knew right then that I gotta do this right. And after that, recently, it was actually a couple of weeks ago, I got a message from my probation officer saying that you're no longer on probation, you're on unsupervised probation, which means I don't have to pay a fine. I can go anywhere in the United States I want to. I can travel, which was just such a blessing. And I know that was God rewarding me for staying on the right path and doing everything right. So in June 24th, 2018, I started going to At One. Real quick, just fell in love with the program and just the people and the outgoing support, and decided to make that my home group. I went there for probably going on 2 years before me and Courtney started talking to her, before I noticed her. I noticed how good she was with kids and how I remember one time I was coming up to the upper room and she was singing. I was like, dang, where's that coming from? And so I noticed that she could sing. She was really good with the kids, watching all the kids while our meeting was going on, and seemed really on fire for God. So I decided to talk to her, and I had noticed a couple times when I was sitting at a table, she would be staring at me, so I kind of got a hint there. And then I would look around, and then she would turn her head, and I was like, oh yeah, it's on.
Wow, way to call me out.
But that's kind of how it started. We went on a date, and we were at the date for 4 hours?
Yeah, we were at the Mexican restaurant for 4 hours, and they were trying to get us to leave.
They were trying to get us to leave. They were tired of refilling my tea. But just after that, we decided to start dating, and before we knew it, Jacob was coming along. At the time, we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but it was just exciting. It was so exciting moment in my life to know that I'm going to be a father, and that I'm going to have a chance to raise a kid.
I first noticed Joshua it was definitely 2 years after he had been coming, that I had started to pick up that he was always there early. I'm a very early person. I'd rather be early than on time. And I noticed he was always there when I would get there, and he would help set up and would greet people as they came in and seemed really friendly but I was just too embarrassed and intimidated to say anything. So, like he said, I just kind of watched from afar. And I remember I had just gotten this tattoo, maybe, or was it this one? I had just gotten a tattoo, and he spoke to me about my tattoo. And I remember thinking, like, this is it. He spoke to me, like, I've got it now. And then I still, after that, couldn't talk to him. And so he ended up coming and talking to me a few times. And the leader of the At One program at our church, his wife and my mom are really good friends. And I had just said in passing to my mom, like, hey, Joshua's kind of cute. And she was like, okay. And I didn't know this at the time, but she had gone that night and told the leader's wife. The leader's wife told him, and he called Joshua late that night and was like, I know somebody who's interested in you. And he told him and gave him my number, and then that's when we ended up going on our first date to the Mexican restaurant. So shortly after we started dating, I brought up the topic of kids because I've always wanted kids. I love kids. I've always wanted to be a mom. And earlier on in the year before we had met, I had been told by my doctor that I would most likely not be able to have children, and because of a disease. And so I was very upfront about that, like, hey, I want kids, but I really don't know if I'm going to be able to. And Josh would always just tell me, like, you'll be able to have kids, you'll be able to have kids. And so I was just like hoping for that, but in the back of my mind was just like, it's not going to happen for me. And about 3 months into our relationship, we found out I was pregnant, which was a shock, to say the least. Both our families were shocked. We were shocked. But, like, deep down, I was so excited because I was just, like, had been praying for this moment my whole life. And I had gone to a healing service at my home church. It was the first time I had ever been to anything like that. And they were like, if you're dealing with any sickness or any ailments, we'd like to pray for you if you want to come up. And so I was like, you know what? Like, why not? Like, what do I have to lose? Like, being prayed over isn't going to change that I can't have kids, is what I was thinking in my head. And I went up, and this man prayed over me, and it was a very emotional experience, but I had just, put it in the back of my head. I was like, okay, that happened. And that was probably, a month before we found out I was pregnant. And then a few weeks ago, I was talking to my dad, and he was like, we're going to this thing at Pastor Vance's church. And I was like, who's Pastor Vance? And he was like, Courtney, that's the guy who prayed over you when you were having the issues with not being able to have a baby. And it was just like a very full circle moment because our son, Jacob, is named after Joshua's father, who's also Vance. And so it was just a really cool experience to experience that. So Catalyst is where Joshua has gone as long as they've been open. And when we started dating, we made the decision that we were going to go to church together. So we were alternating back and forth between going to my home church and coming here. And I remember that Ben had preached a message called Finding Where You Fit, and how, you needed to be plugged in and all these things. And I just remember thinking, like, I had gotten so out of touch at my home church and just had, like, really, like, taken a back seat and wasn't really serving. I had gotten comfortable, basically. And so we talked about it, we prayed about it. It was not an easy decision to come to because I had grown up at my old church my whole life. That's where I've always gone. But I knew that this is where God wanted me, and Ben even said in the message, like, that the right decisions are never going to be easy. They're going to be difficult and painful to make. And so we made the decision to start coming to Catalyst full time. And I believe it was a few weeks or a month or so after the Finding Where You Fit message, the church was going through a very hard time, and Ben was asking for volunteers for things like worship team and cleaning and things like that. And Joshua nudged me in service and said, "Babe, like, you need to do that." And so I went up to Ben after the service and told him I'd like to be in the worship team. And so I had my little private audition and started getting plugged into the worship team. And since that decision, God's really been moving and working in our lives more than ever. I had gone to a weekend retreat with some ladies from my mom's church, and it was there that I fell under deep conviction that we were living our lives as a married couple, and we hadn't made the decision to get married. We had been engaged for a year, but there was no projection past that. There was no wedding planning going on. We had gotten very comfortable in our sin, so to speak. And so I sat down with Joshua when I got home that weekend and told him what I was feeling, and that, not to be rude, but if you're not going to marry me, you got to get out. And he didn't take that as well as I anticipated. But once we were able to talk more about it and go into depth and just really communicate our feelings and our own personal convictions to each other, we made the decision to get married. We were okay, we're going to do it. We're going to get married. And then the problem of finances, of course, happened. And we were oh my God, we can't afford to be married. We can't afford to pay our bills and pay for a wedding. So we had we're going to the courthouse. We're going to get married. And of course, my lovely mother said that no, I was not, and that she would make something happen. And so it wasn't long after that a bunch of people that we knew and loved us and have invested into our lives pitched in and donated things for our wedding. And a month later, we were able to get married. And throughout that whole month, I just kept going back to what was revealed to me. If you're obedient, I'm going to take care of you. God telling me that, if you're obedient to the things that I'm telling you, you won't have to worry about your finances. You won't have to worry about the money for the wedding. And it was true that everything he had spoken to me had come to pass. And, God gives you the choice between life and death. And you should choose life every time. He is obedient. He's proven that over and over and over again, especially in our lives. And we couldn't be more blessed with how things have turned out.
Christmas of 2020 really highlights the phrase beauty for ashes for me and my family. We had a great Christmas day, just enjoying each other, the kids, my mom, my sister, and it was our first Christmas with my new grandbaby. So that's always fun when you have a baby around. And so we just had a really, really awesome day. And as things were kind of settling down, I had sat down on the couch for a little bit, and I was just kind of reflecting on the day. And the Lord just spoke to me very strongly. I felt it in my heart and in my mind. The Lord just spoke a word to me, and he told me, he said, "You lack nothing." And that was very powerful to me, because life certainly is not how I thought it would be, or how I planned it, or what I thought my life would look like at this stage. But the Lord told me that I lack nothing. And I realized at that point that with Jesus, I knew this, but it really hit me at that moment that I have Jesus, so I have everything. And so it was such a strong feeling and word to me. I immediately wrote it down in my journal because I didn't want to ever forget that feeling of how that felt when the Lord told me that. And so I just realized that no matter what happens in my life or what doesn't happen in my life, that as long as God is in control of everything and I have faith in Him, that it's going to be okay. And that I can choose hope. I can choose gratitude, and I choose it every day. I choose life. And it's just powerful. It's been such a powerful word to me. And I just wanted to share that even when you don't feel like the Lord is with you or you don't feel like the Lord is working in your life, He's there. You just have to keep moving. You have to focus on God and your faith. And there is life after loss. Jesus really is enough, and the best really is in front of us.